grace is always enough. You said your heart would never forget or forsake me. You said I'm saved, you call me yours. You said my future's full of your hope. You never failed, so I know that you'll never fail me. You said your love will never give up. You said your grace is always enough. You said your heart will never forget or forsake me. And you said I'm safe, you call me yours. You said my future's full of your hope. You never failed, so I know that you'll never fail. I'll take you at your word. If you said it, I'll believe it. I've seen how good it works. If you start it, you'll complete it. I'll take you at your word. If you said it, I'll believe it. I've seen how good it works. Start it, you'll complete it. I'll take you at your word. 'Cause you're good on your promise. You're good on your promise. I'll take you at your word.
Last week, I briefly mentioned during the message time that at different points in my life, I might have responded differently to the question, why do I believe? I might have responded differently based on my maturity, based on my understanding, based on my experience, whatever it may be, my perspective at the time. And I stand by that. But today I want to circle back to that question, and I want to remove myself from it. Instead of asking the question, why do I believe? I want us to jump into the story right after that resurrection and ask the question, why did they believe? Why did the first believers believe? Why did they believe with such confidence that they were willing to follow this belief, this claim, even to the point of losing their lives, because they believed in the resurrection of Jesus from the dead? That ended up being the thing that turned the tide for everyone. That was why Peter and John were first thrown into prison for preaching the resurrection. That was why Peter was eventually killed. That was why John was eventually in prison. That's why all of those disciples lost their lives. That's why those outside of the 12 lost their lives as well. You can go through the book of Acts, find Stephen and so many others who lost their lives because they believed the resurrection. Well, what caused them to believe with that kind of confidence? Why did they believe? Well, I want us to open up our Bibles to a few different books today. We're going to take a little tour through what was happening in their lives. We'll look at the book of Luke, the book of John, and the book of 1 Corinthians. And we'll begin with the book of Luke. I want us to take a look at 5 building blocks for them to get to the point where they were able to say, willing to say, I believe so wholeheartedly in the resurrection of Jesus that I'll lose my last breath for this cause. I'm willing to do that. In Luke chapter 24, we read a portion of this last week, but he's still alive, so we can actually preach Easter even after Easter, I guess. Luke chapter 24, verse 1. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of Jesus, of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has risen. There was never a wave of support or any real claim that Jesus didn't live, that Jesus didn't die, or that Jesus wasn't buried. That was never really a thing. I'm sure some people at some point said that, but there's never been this mountain of evidence that people have had to fight through for those particular points. It was always, well, there was a man named Jesus that lived during the time of King Herod, and this man, Jesus, when he was a young man, roughly 33 years old, was sentenced to die because he claimed to be the Messiah. And then that man was buried in a tomb owned by a man named Joseph from a place called Arimathea. Like, that has been accepted as fact. It's not really argued. You could find some who just want to be difficult, just like I could say today, I don't believe the whole George Washington thing. Like, I just don't believe. Say, well, you can't not believe in George Washington. I can't. I've never met the guy. Like, I've never seen video. I've never seen a real picture of him. I don't know. You say, well, there are paintings. My granny had a painting of Jesus, and no one seemed to accept that as fact. So it could have been the blue eyes, but regardless, there was a painting there along the way. You could say, well, we've read about George Washington, all the historical books. Same thing with Jesus over and over again. Believers, unbelievers, enemies, friends, they all wrote, and no one said that guy didn't live. It's all there. You can say, well, look at the evidence of what happened afterwards from George Washington to the next president and on and on. I could look at the same. 2,000 years ago, this thing that we call the resurrection is said to have happened. 2,000 years later, we have 1,000 people who are waiting in a mile and a half line to get into this little building just to celebrate the fact that he's alive. So we could go back and forth all day, but anyone who's done any real research and truly tried to figure it out comes to the understanding that Jesus lived during the time of Herod, that Jesus was executed because he claimed to be the Messiah, and that he was buried. That is not disputed by any large number of people. The issue is the tomb. The issue is that on that first day when Mary, and Joanna went to the tomb to anoint the dead body of Jesus, that the body was gone. And then John and Peter ran to the tomb, and they saw that he was gone. And that is where the issue began, with this idea of an empty tomb. And so as we look through these 5 things, the first bit of evidence for them, again, not for us, but for them, this first bit of evidence I just called location, and then parentheses, where he wasn't. Like, they went to the place where they knew he was, and he was no longer there. They went to the place where this dead body was supposed to be, and instead of death, instead of discouragement, instead of depression, they found a little confusion because the body was not there. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. The last time they saw him, he was in this spot. At that moment, he was no longer there. But that alone, of course, would have just started a rumor. That would not have been enough to say, well, I believe in the resurrection. They could have come up with an idea, but there was from their standpoint, no real proof to say, oh, he's alive. So we move forward, and we'll come back to Luke 24, just as a word of warning, so if you want to earmark that. Move forward to John chapter 20, the very next book in the New Testament, the book of John. John chapter 20, we have an account that John wrote of the same moment. John was one of those that went to the tomb to see that it was empty. John and Peter ran. Remember last week we looked at it, and John reminds us that he ran faster than Peter and all that. In John chapter 20, in verse 11, John wrote, "Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw 2 angels standing in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying?' 'They have taken my Lord away,' she said, 'and I don't know where they have put him.' At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?' Thinking he was the gardener, she said, 'Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him.' And Jesus said to her, Mary. And she turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. And we're told that she then ran to the 11, found them and said, fellas, or in Greek, guys, like, he's alive. Like, I found him. Now, there was an abrupt change at one point in what we just read. At first, there is someone standing there. She thinks he works there, and she's not paying a lot of attention to him. And he asks her a question. She doesn't get it. And then he says her name. And he said her name in a way that was familiar to her, and she immediately recognized that tone. She recognized that voice, and she said, Rabboni, Rabbi, teacher. Like, I know who you are. The second bit of evidence, and it really is specific to Mary in this moment, but it happened a couple of other times, is friendship. In parentheses, who he knew. She had location first. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. Then now this moment, this element of friendship for her, that he knew her and called her by name. What we're going to see, and you already probably know most of this, but what we'll see here as we move forward is Jesus was different afterwards in some ways. We're going to find him walking through doors that are closed, appearing and disappearing and having moments of, is this real? Is this a ghost? And Jesus even had to say at one point, I'm not a ghost. Can a ghost eat and do this? Let's have a meal together. So does a ghost have bones? Does a ghost have this? I clearly do. So there's something different. And even to the point where, and perhaps maybe Jesus just supernaturally veiled that from her eyes. But there's something to the point where she didn't recognize him until he called her by name. And she said, I know that voice. No one says Mary like he said Mary. And she knew. And as we look throughout this gospel telling of the resurrection, we're going to find that the resurrected Jesus, even for all that was different, was still the same Jesus. And he went to his friends first. And he went to them and called them by name. He went to them, he approached them, and he spent time with them, and he valued them. So even though things were different, and now Jesus was resurrected, and it was clear glory had come to those who were recognizing him, he was still Jesus. He was still their friend. He maintained those relationships, and he even deepened some of those relationships with some of those old friends that he had. He still claimed his crew. If you were Jesus, I know that's hard for us to jump into, but if you're Jesus and so many scattered and ran away when you needed them the most, when you came back, it probably would be more like a payback or maybe silent treatment, but definitely not, Mary, how are you? And then showing up with the 11 saying, it's good to see you again. That's probably not how we in our humanity would respond. But Jesus chose to respond that way. And for Mary, that's all she needed. Like, I know that guy. He's my friend. I know him. This is Jesus. Back to Luke chapter 24 for the third piece here. In verse 25, and we're back at Luke's telling of it, Jesus is now walking, or a couple of friends are walking from Jerusalem to a place called Emmaus, and they're talking about the crucifixion and how disappointed they are. And Jesus shows up, and in verse 25, he says to them, how foolish you are and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going farther, which is kind of cool, a little sense of humor there. He knew what was about to happen, but they urged him strongly, stay with us, for it is nearly evening, the day is almost over. So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread and gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? So they finally got it. And I love the way they said, our hearts were on fire when he was talking to us, and we knew something was up, and it was him. So they ran back to Jerusalem, and we're told they found the 11 and said, fellas, guys. And then someone spoke up and said, we already talked to Mary. Like, we're trying to process this as well. Like, oh, well, I had resurrection news. We got it. Let's figure this thing out. Like, what in the world has just happened? After the resurrection, Jesus' initial focus, each time he connected with these old friends of his, was to take what had been written about him years prior and what he had even said over the recent years and connect it to what had just happened. He took truth and said, this is why this happened. This is why this matters. This is how this is all connected together. You should have seen this in the past with Moses and the prophets and the Psalms. You should have heard all this and seen all this. You should have known. You should have listened to me when I said I was going to suffer, die, and 3 days later I would be raised up. And he began to have all those moments, those conversations, those one by one, and one get with two, and then one with a group of 11, these private conversations in which he took truth and he talked it through for them and helped them understand and connect the dots. So this third piece of evidence is in private conversation. So you've got this location idea. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. You've got this idea of him coming on the scene, showing up and calling them by name. You've got this friendship, relationship piece that he knew who they were. And now we've got these private conversations where, okay, Jesus has come and gone. He disappeared. We have a few people talking. And now Jesus is starting to connect the dots with each of the disciples and each of his followers. He was certainly happy to be there. I would imagine there were a lot of hugs and pounds, and if they did the high five, I imagine if they did that back then, they did all that. I'm sure there were, oh, I've missed you so much. I haven't seen you since Thursday, and I just, all this stuff, and like it's been 3 whole days, and I'm sure there were those moments. But Jesus took each of those conversations and said, it's good to be here with you. I love you. I've missed you. But let's talk about something important. And let me tell you what my Father just did. Let me tell you why I just did what I did. Let me tell you why this had to happen this way. He talked truth with them. It wasn't just, I'm glad to be your friend. It was, let me tell you exactly what God's been up to in this moment. And that was another layer of evidence for them. Now, we're going to move ahead a couple of decades to the next letter that was written. It's called 1 Corinthians. And 1 Corinthians was written by Paul. Paul was not one of the 12 disciples. If you thought that, that's okay. A lot of people mix him up with them. He wasn't following Jesus during that time. And after the resurrection, Paul was one of the key leaders in trying to kill the resurrection movement. So he would find people who claimed publicly that Jesus had been resurrected from the dead. He would arrest them, imprison them, and sentence them to death. That was what Paul was primarily known for a couple of decades here. When we fast forward to the late 50s, not 1950s, but just 50s, just the 50s. That's a long time ago. We fast forward there about 20 to 25 years after Jesus' resurrection. Paul has still not had anyone convince him he should follow Jesus. But he's on the road and Jesus just shows up and confronts him, gives him a vision and says, listen, why are you persecuting me? And Paul stepped back and there was a moment of revelation and Paul said, I got to believe now. And Jesus commissioned him and said, you are going to be a key in spreading the resurrection story. So now we have in the late 50s here, a letter that was written to a group of Christians in Corinth, which is why it's called Corinthians. And listen to what he tells them along the way, because he goes back to something that happened post-resurrection, which is important for us to grasp another reason why the early believers believed. He said in verse 1, or wrote in verse 1, now, brothers and sisters, I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received and on which you have taken your stand. By this gospel, you are saved, if you hold firmly to the word I preached to you. Otherwise, you have believed in vain. For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the scriptures, that he was buried, and then he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, Peter, and then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living. And that last piece is really important. He said, after the resurrection, he appeared to over 500 people, most of whom are still living. The idea that the resurrection story is this myth that was created by 11 people and some gullible followers just doesn't hold any water when you realize that you have someone just 25 or so years later writing and saying, we've got 500 people and most of them are still alive who can attest to exactly what it is I'm telling you right here, that Jesus was resurrected. They all saw. All of their stories come together to support what the followers, early followers of Jesus, the disciples, Mary, Joanna, what they saw. All of it comes together. And there is this overwhelming bit of evidence. It's not just about a private conversation. It's not just, I saw Jesus, I talked with him. We actually had bread together. It was really cool. I want to see him. Well, just got to take my word. It was, there are 500 plus people who saw the resurrected Jesus. And Paul wrote, they're still around. I mean, most of them, if they're 20 years old, 20 years is a lot, but when you're in your 40s, you still have a little bit of memory left. Like you can still go, yeah, I was there. I was a part of that. I was in that crowd. We saw him. And we spread the word about him. It's really important for us to grasp this piece because it was important for them as well. So this fourth building block, this fourth bit of evidence was his public appearance. So they had these private conversations, but you've also got the masses, these 500 people going, no, it's the real thing. If we had a moment like that today, and after you're all left and I decided to stay behind, just felt burdened to pray for you a little bit more, it's 12:05 and I'm by myself here 12:15, and I have a moment, I have a vision, and God tells me something, it'd be great if I show up next Sunday, go, God gave me a vision last week, and a couple of you would just go, that's cool, tell us about it, I'm all in. But 95% of you would go, is anybody else there? Like, are you sure? And for me to go, everybody was gone. My wife was out of town. Like I was just kind of by myself. And I got this vision that whatever it may be, that Dolly Parton was supposed to pay for our, I had this vision and I don't know. And maybe some of you who, maybe we've prayed together, walked together, done life together for a long time. I've known some of you for decades now and around the Clarksville area. So maybe you give me a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, but it'd be much easier if we were able to say, no, I was here, the whole third service was here. Like we all got it. We were all here. We all experienced the same thing. It's hard to argue against all of that. And when we take a look at the story of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus, it's not just 11 people and a couple of ladies who said, yeah, I saw him. You have over 500 people who experienced this, his public appearances, and were able to testify to that. And that is why, as a result, afterwards, you've got Paul going one direction, taking Luke with him for a while, Luke writing it all down. Luke's been commissioned to write a story of Jesus and try to research and get it get it correct rather. You've got John writing, got Peter writing, you have all those come together. Paul's writing all these different letters. These are all eyewitnesses or companions of eyewitnesses, and everything they wrote ended up being our New Testament. Now, I know we could argue and we could have debates about things, but in the end, Scripture is so clear and it has been tested, and it is not ignorant and it is not silly to say this right here is God's word. And until I have a better reason not to believe, I'm trusting in what this is. Public appearance. And then the final one is in John chapter 20 again. Back to that chapter. And again, this was the evidence for them. This is why they believed as confidently as they did. In John chapter 20, verse 24, we've got this one disciple named Thomas who missed out on the meeting originally when Jesus kind of walked in, showed up, and revealed himself. In verse 24, it says, Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." This to me is one of the more amazing parts of the entire resurrection story. And I think I took it for granted as a young person, because you'd see pictures with nail holes in hands or wrists, and you would see the side and you'd see scars. But Jesus' body was resurrected. He was raised up. It's a glorified body. The body can pass through walls or doors or something. It's something that's different. And it appears it might have even been different to the point where they didn't quickly recognize him. Again, that could have been a spiritual, Jesus didn't allow it, but there was something different about his body. It was this glorified body, this perfected body that when we think about a resurrected body, we talk about one of these days, this old body is going to fall apart, but when Jesus calls me home, I'll be resurrected. I won't have any of all the issues and struggles and sicknesses and on and on and on. Well, Jesus had that resurrected body here, and yet that resurrected body retained the scars. That is significant. Every other time Jesus healed, he healed completely. He healed an ear that had been chopped off. He healed diseases and sicknesses, and he healed people who had worked through stuff, not to the point of, well, now you should at least be able to manage your symptoms. Like, no, it was, you are well. Walk in the name of the Lord, be healed. Like it was not, well, I'll work on this and just, be careful, don't drink milk anymore, and you'll be fine. But there was healing. And Jesus comes out of the tomb and he retained his scars. And he retained scars as evidence so that the people could see what he had endured. That fifth stone, that fifth stacking stone, that block of scars. And I wrote in my own notes, parentheses, what he endured. What he had gone through was critically important for him, even where he was at that point. That was the reason they were so confident of their belief. But we're unable to experience that right now. We're not probably going to see Jesus come through the walls and say hello to us. Most of us are not going to be able to travel to Israel to look inside the tomb. And even if you do, I was able to be there when I was a college student and went to Israel. And, I still had to go, where is it? Right there? Okay, I'll take your word for it. This was the one. It was empty. I do attest to that. But it's very different. We're not able to have the experiences that the disciples had, which is why Jesus said, blessed are those who are not going to see but still believe. But I do think it's important for us to at least consider the fact that the greatest evidence for the resurrection of Jesus today is not being able to go to Israel and see an empty tomb. And it's not even researching old scrolls and looking at old scriptures and old stories and comparing them. It's seeing resurrection power in the lives of the people around us. It is a life that has been resurrected that makes people go, maybe Jesus is alive. Maybe there was a resurrection there. So I want to close in asking myself, and maybe you want to ask yourself, those same questions that mirror the evidence that they experience. Number one, am I really in a different place now? Location was that important moment of evidence for them. Jesus wasn't where he was. Can people who knew me before look at my life and say, he's not where he was? He was in a dark place before. He's not there anymore. I can see the difference. I can see the change. Is there a difference? Am I in a different place? Secondly, and I think equally as important, do my friends know that I'm still their friend? Jesus has done this great thing around me, in me, through me, all over me, great. But there are people around me who didn't experience the same thing. Am I still willing to claim my crew and say, we're still friends. I'm still in your life. I'm still here for you. Regardless of whether you accept what I've based my life on or what I'm standing on or not, I'm still here for you. You can scatter, you can run, or you can stay, but I'm still with you. The third question, do my private conversations contain truth? It's easy for me to hang out with some of you one-on-one or a couple of us together, and we can talk about everything else but what is important. And we can sit around and we can go back and forth for hours and hours and never stop to bring up the name of Jesus that I say is the most important thing on earth. But I'm able to do it. Some of you may be able to do it as well. That doesn't help our cause. That doesn't bring evidence. But when I'm able to say, you know what, this reminds me of a time in my life when God did this. Or, this makes sense because of this. Or have you ever considered this? That changes things. Number 4, do all my circles see the same person? Jesus' public appearance and his private conversations worked hand in hand. They didn't contradict each other. Am I the same person? Will people see me in one spot and say, yep, we see him as this way, and another crowd, yep, that's who he is to me, because we're all really good at putting up different faces. And maybe the people you go to school with see you in one way, the people you go to church with see you another way, the people in your neighborhood see you a different way, your spouse sees you this way, your kids see you this way. Are we the same people? There's evidence and consistency there. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, do you display the glorified scars? All of us have been through some stuff. We've all had things happen in life that we were this close to allowing them to separate us from Jesus. But God healed us. They hurt, but we're better. And it's those moments, those scars that perhaps might be your greatest bit of evidence. That thing that you're hiding, that part of your story that you don't want anyone else to know, that part of your life that you just want to forget forever. I'm not saying we need to relive those moments, but I am saying those may be the greatest bits of evidence that Jesus is alive and he's changing lives and he's still resurrecting souls. I want to close with this scripture. In John chapter 20, verse 31, I'm just going to read this. You can listen or read it on the screen. It says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And then in the next chapter, it says, this is the disciple who testifies to these things and who wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true. Jesus did many other things as well, and if every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written.
Flowers and all of their beauty. I don't have to wonder, you know what you're doing. So why would I worry at all when you're faithful to supply everything I need, everything I need. Oh, my Father has it, my Father has it. Every single time the Lord will provide. Oh, my Father has it, my Father has it, yes. Got the sparrow lacking for nothing, no fear of tomorrow and what it will bring. everything I need, everything I need. My Father has it, my Father has it. Every single time the Lord will provide. Oh, my Father has it, my Father has it, yes. Oh, my Father has it. Seek first. So seek first the kingdom and its treasures. Everything else will be added. All that I'm needing, oh, I know the Lord will provide. 'Cause I know my God's not empty-handed. He gives us blessings upon blessings, and I'm still believing. Oh, I know the Lord will provide. Seek first. So seek first the kingdom and its treasures. Everything else it will be added, and all that I'm needing. Oh, I know the Lord will provide. 'Cause I know my God's not empty-handed. He gives us blessings upon blessings, and I'm still believing. Oh, I know the Lord will provide everything I need. Oh, everything I need. Oh, my Father has it, my Father has it. Every single time the Lord will provide. I know my Father has it, my Father. Everything I need. Oh, everything I need. I know my Father has it, my Father has it. Every single time the Lord will provide. I know my Father has it. Seek first the kingdom and its treasures. Everything else it will be added. All that I'm needing. Oh, I know the Lord will provide. 'Cause I know my God's not empty-handed. He gives us blessings upon blessings, and